We're gonna put this one in our opening range.
40.
Gonna start with a call. Try to find a 4.
Call.
Okay, cutoff open, button flat. This is a pretty shit spot with this hand, but I want to V-pip it. Not necessarily as a part of a holistic strategy. This is more of just like a one-off spot. I don't think Chris's button flat range is very protected. Just going through sheer motions and everything else, he called very quickly. I think if he was trapping, he would need to give an explanation of that. I think you're just going to find him having a lot of natural hands that fit into a calling range, such as pocket pairs, and his worst suited connectors, some of which I'll dominate. Lukich obviously could have a reasonable hand here opening, but I don't think he's going to have a lot of 4-bets if he wants to play that game with me. He's just going to win it this time. So I'm actually going to be squeezing here. And if Chris comes with a 4-bet, I think that we're going to play a really awkward pot because I'm really just not buying it, and I'm just going to deviate pretty far off into the exploitative tree. I feel like 200 is probably adequate. 130 in the pot. It's maybe a little bit much. So let's go 175.
175 is the bet.
I'm really glad Matt did that because I'm relatively a little bit tired and a little bit hot in this room, and it's definitely hard to keep concentration, especially while not being able to really hear the action or hear what's happening around me. And so I know that, I don't know about other people, but I definitely have a tendency to just want to do stupid stuff sometimes to get re-engaged, but this is definitely not one of those moments.
All right, so in this spot here, I would be 4-betting aces, kings, ace, king, and probably a hand like ace, jack, offsuit. I'd probably widen that a little bit more against Berkey because I think Berkey's going to be a little bit looser here than normal. I'm probably calling a pretty wide range of pocket pairs, suited broadways, suited connectors. This is clearly a fold, but I just want to, it was a little bit of a loose open to begin with, but.
So I think I'm about 3K effective with Berkey, but not getting too good of a price. And on some of the combinations of flops where I flop a set, I get set or resetted by the top of range. I think I'm just gonna make a disciplined fold here. Let him squeeze. I'm protected by some better hands in this spot. It's not like I'm being exploited.
Pretty standard button open. These guys haven't been overly active from the blinds. I will have to likely fold to a 3-bet, so I think sizing up slightly here doesn't hurt. Again, I think that these ranges have been rather elastic all night, so we just kind of get them to put in passive money at a higher rate.
40.
So with my hand in this formation against some opponents, I will start, throw this in my 3-betting. However, given Berkey's more the sticky type, I would expand the top of my range instead of including some natural bluffing hands in my 3-bet range. So we're just gonna call with this and then look for spots where we just simply play post. So this range is gonna hit both of us. It's definitely gonna help my big blind defense range. With my particular hand, I don't have to do anything too crazy. I'm gonna be perceived to have coverage with the middle cards, which won't really allow Berkey to trip off unless he has certain candidates in his range. But I'm largely gonna not blow this out of proportion with my hand and then just play it based on run out. So we're gonna largely check call and then just take it from there.
All right, these boards can be a little bit tricky. We are against a pretty wide range defending out of the big blind. He's gonna have a lot of natural continues though. All hands that contain some sort of straight draw, all hands that contain some sort of flush draw as well as some backdoor flush draws. I still think that I get to range bet here at a pretty high frequency. My combination sucks in some ways. It does kind of convolute the target. He's gonna have a lot less queen jack, a lot less king queen. But it also does block like queen 8 suited, queen 7 suited, which he would have as natural calls. So I'm gonna start off by barreling for about third pot, and dependent upon turns, I'll be mixing between checking and betting when I improve. There are some 10s and 6s that I think may be favorable for me. So we have 85 in the pot. I'm gonna go for a $30 bet.
30.
So Berkey went ahead and decided to do basically a down bet strategy. I think the reason he's doing this is his anticipation of my defense being pretty much high given the board coverage. What this bet size allows him to do is just get his range through. And we don't want to make that too easy implementable on his side. So what I'm actually gonna do is start implementing a heavy check raise strategy against down bets. And the way I'm gonna split this going forward is that I'm gonna extrapolate this out flop, turn, and river, and include my specific hand into a check raise, check call on the turn, where I'm also gonna split with made hands and bluffs going forward as well. So with my specific hand, we're gonna take that line and hopefully force him into mistakes where he's gonna defend his ranges, which is gonna include a lot of the draws naturally, his ace-x, and some middle pairs that he's also doing this with. So hopefully we'll force him into mistakes with the middle portion of his range. This might get tricky, so we'll see where this goes.
125.
The sizing by Fausto is kind of interesting. It's a little bit on the small side, which kind of alludes to me that he may be a bit outside of his frequencies, maybe going to this a little bit too widely. You know, his natural check raises here are going to be ace-8, 8-7, ace-7 for value. He could begin to start check raising some 8x of clubs, ace-x of clubs. But if he does it with all of them, then he really has a very unprotected check call range, particularly when those backdoors come through. He has a lot of other available combinations, as I mentioned, 5-6, 9-10, Jack-10, hands of that nature. Obviously, my hand is a very clear fold. Yeah, I mean, I guess given the anti-blocking properties of my hand, I should expect to get check raised at a little bit higher of a frequency. I wish I had more of a candidate to continue, because for this sizing, I'd be curious to see how he's actually constructing and how turns would play out, how often he'd be leaning on a very large bet versus a check. But this is just gonna fall into a fold category for me.
Yes, I think Poker All Out is great because you can hear people's thoughts and see what's going on through their minds at that moment. And the beauty of it is that you could see like flaws as well. It's like not everybody plays perfect all the time. Oh, this guy is great, but like he messes up also. And it's like, all right, that's refreshing, because like it gives me some confidence to like not put so much pressure on myself when I do go play and say, okay, sometimes I am gonna mess up and that's okay, you know? and then seeing like what happened, why they messed up, you know, and like see if both of their minds are on the same page. Like, you see their intentions, and then you could put 2 and 2 together and say, okay, like, all right, this guy really didn't know what he's talking about. Like, oh, he did have a plan, it just kind of worked out, and then it's poker, you know.
I'm gonna definitely open here, and I'm just gonna go for a standard size hand.
30.
I think I have a hand that's a little weak, but it's good enough to defend out of the big blind. So. I'm pretty much going to check my entire range here.
Okay, Michael checks, and we have a slightly coordinated board. I am going to check back. Purpose being, I don't really have any draws. Backdoor, I'm suited, but the wrong color completely. And I know I have 2 overs, but I've been really active this game so far, and I'm against one of the tighter players at the table. So we're going to check with the intent of betting any of our straight draw, backdoors, or if we connect.
So middling boards in general are going to be a little bit more favorable for me than for Chris's range. I have all 9x coverage here. Chris probably checks back some 9x on the flop. This is definitely a more favorable board for me though right now, so I am going to bet at this, and I'm going to bet about half pot. So
30.
Board pairs, the 9 is not terrible for me. With my ace high is still good a good portion of the time here. Question is here if he's also has ace-x hands that he was calling with, which he does have some of those inside of his range, and small pairs. I'm going to simply call and move to the next street.
All right, so that's a pretty good card for me. Clubs get there, which is a problem. I think my bet on the turn, it's a little, in retrospect, I think it's a little iffy. I definitely can clean up a lot of equity from overs that miss, but a lot of his overs, queen jack, king queen, call that bet regardless. I'm gonna check and evaluate here. I think he still does have a lot of those hands that continue on the turn that may, especially with a club, try to take a stab at the river here, and I can actually turn this into a check call. But I'm going to check and see what Chris does and react from there.
Okay, Michael checks, and this is kind of a clubs complete. I have no blockers to clubs, and I think this is just, I'm going to try to see showdown here, and my ace high is typically good a lot of the time. Let's see. No good.
Queen 8 suited. Gonna be an open here, pretty standard.
30.
So I think that it would be a mistake to 3-bet this sort of hand class that can dominate other one-pair hands that wouldn't call a 3-bet, like Jack 10 off, 9 10 off, Ace 8 off, those kinds of things. So I'm going to retain all those through a call and take the showdown value.
Pure range bet on this board. Pretty much going to bet 100% of my range here and take it from there. He expects this, I presume. Also have pretty good, the classic bottom pair trip draw for huge bets to come in on a later street. If he chooses to check raise here, I would probably put in some 3-bets, although I never expect to check raise on this board, pretty much ever. So pot being 65, I'm gonna start with a very small bet size of $15.
15.
So chin bets 1/3, which makes sense because of how many hands I contain and how often he c-bets this texture. Thinking about the possibility of a check raise, but I am going to continue through a call.
Check.
Double flush draw board here. I expect Chris to expect high frequency polarized betting. I think that at this point he has a fair amount of continues with backdoors. He won't necessarily be able to bet those on the river. Too often it's gonna be really hard to find bluffs here. I also improve. I don't necessarily want to release the showdown of my hand on this exact card, so I'm going to check.
This is interesting. I expected a pretty high frequency barrel from Chin. Maybe he turned a pair with 6-7 of hearts or something, or chose to c-bet a showdown value hand. My target is pretty murky here because I expect him to check back most of the hands that I would be targeting for value on the flop. I am pretty unclear as to how he's constructing in this line. I don't think he has Jack 10 ever. Potentially just an 8 that he bet for denial, but whatever I bet, we'll just start with a bet. We have a good hand. Go for a small bet.
30.
So it's 30. All right, raise to 30 pre-flop call. That's 65. Then facing 15. He's betting now third pot on the river, which is a river block, which he expects me to be pretty showdown driven. I unblock a lot of his bluff catchers here. So I could get thin and just raise like pretty big here if I wanted to, ripping extremely thin value, which is kind of cool, simply because he should expect a lot of my diamond combinations to be barreling through on the turn. Also his Jack 10s would just mostly be, can't really 3-bet. So that's good. So I only get 3-bet here by a flush. I'm kind of gonna go for it just simply because it doesn't look like I have like anything, especially when I choose the down bet with range. When I land here, choosing a raise size here is pretty thin, but kind of good. So I'm kind of gonna go for it. Some really thin value. If he finds a 3-bet, then that's great, and I'm just gonna evaluate at that point. Maybe probably lean fold. So let's just kind of go for it and see if he makes a mistake.
$110.
I'm probably gonna just put this in. I'm close to the top, probably only lose to like 8, 9 of diamonds.
Call. Shows. Keep back.